Continuing our reading in The World and Thorinn by Damon Knight. Today is Chapter 3, Section 5. When Thorinn had eaten his fill, he picked up his bundle of garments, not liking to leave it behind, and went to ease himself in a patch of low ground vines at the edge of the trees, where he had seen others doing the same. The place had a rank smell, yet not so much as might have been expected. The broad brownish-green leaves were curled up and clasped into lumpy bundles here and there, and when he had accomplished his needs, he saw them crawling slowly like crippled snakes to cover what he had left. Thorinn watched them for a moment, marveling, then turned back down the slope. After a few paces, he stopped and spread out his bundle of garments, meaning to use the leg thongs to tie it together more compactly. At once he was surrounded by children with alert and curious faces. They squatted to watch him as he worked, reached out now and then to finger the leather of breeks or wallet, chattering and piping among themselves. Thorinn did not hinder them except to keep them from prying into his wallet. But one boy, bolder than the rest, plucked up the sword before Thorinn could stop him and drew it half out of the scabbard. Alarmed and angered, Thorinn sprang at him, pushed him roughly, and snatched the sword back. The boy lay sprawled on the grass, his head half lifted, his mouth an "oh." The other children had fallen silent and were staring at Thorinn. The boy's eyes slowly filled with tears, while the others made mournful noises and wrung their heads. He got to his feet. With dragging steps he moved away toward the shrubbery. Thorinn called after him, but he did not turn. He went to the pod vines, stood a moment with head hanging before an empty pod, then climbed in and lay down inside it. The pod slowly closed around him. Thorinn noticed that the other children had backed away, leaving a clear circle around him. Their faces were pale, their eyes big. A questioning call came up the slope. One of the children answered briefly. Another question, another reply. Other voices boomed, piped. Thorinn buckled the sword belt around his waist, quickly finished wrapping the shirt, breeks, and wallet into a bundle, and tied it with the thongs. Carrying the bundle in one hand, he moved down toward the river. To either side, up and down the long green meadow, he could see dots of faces turned to watch him. All the people seemed to have stopped what they were doing. They were motionless and silent. Thorinn kept going, turning now and then to look back, but no one followed him. The meadow sloped down into a weedy grass and sledge, became a marsh. Thorinn waded out between heavy clumps of grass in cool water up to his knees. Little yellow birds burst out of the marsh grass before him, fluttered erratically for a moment around his head, then dropped out of sight. Up the river, where the stream made a gentle bend, he could see larger birds standing in the water, their long necks looping. They had red breasts and iridescent wing feathers. Skylight sparkled in the droplets that fell from their beaks. He stopped where the marsh grass ended, and a muddy bottom grew deeper. To his left, he could see down a river, a matter of half a league or so, before it disappeared between two gentle hills. To the right, the river curved only a few hundred ells away. Beyond, over the treetops, he could see distant mountains and a faint, bright thread that might have been a waterfall. The river ran silver smooth before him. On the opposite bank was another green slope, narrower and weedier than this one. Then trees, then mountains. The sky was bright and blank overhead. He had hoped to see some mark in the sky, but there was none. He would have to wait until nightfall. He hoped that what he was doing was right. Then he hopped back through the shallow water. Above him, on the slope, a few of the people were standing watching him. Others had gone back to their games, but the little circle around the heaps of food seemed to have broken up. He could see groups of children who seemed to be carrying something toward the shrubbery, passing other groups coming back. As he approached, he saw that the people were making ready to leave. It was the remains of their meal that the children were carrying. They dropped their armloads in the vines, went back for more. Nearby, he could see a few pods opening, people climbing out. The people were drifting slowly together, all moving in the same direction, forming little moving groups, some with arms linked. Their voices were cheerful. None approached him as he walked up the slope, but a few smiled. And that's the end of section 5.